Life is made up of many gorgeous moments. Cherish them all, big and small, with Blue Nile. Whether it's for yourself or a loved one, Blue Nile's unrivaled selection of expertly crafted fine jewelry and statement pieces help make all your moments sparkle. Blue Nile's experts are on hand to guide you, and their diamond guarantee ensures you get the highest quality at the best price. Celebrate a life well lived in the most radiant way and save up to 30% at BlueNile.com. That's BlueNile.com.
Oh my God, it's the coolest thing ever. Hey guys, have you heard of Goldbelly? Well, check this out. It's this amazing site where they ship the most iconic, famous foods from restaurants across the country, anywhere nationwide. I've never found a more perfect gift than food. They ship Chicago deep dish pizza, New York bagels, Maine lobster rolls, and even Ina Garten's famous cakes. Seriously. So if you're looking for a gift for the food lover in your life, head to goldbelly.com and get 20% off your first order with promo code GIFT.
Hello, this is Simon Brew. I'm the editor of Film Stories magazine, and a very warm welcome to a very special episode of the Film Stories podcast.
Come with me.
And I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
In movies that had stories.
That the story just sucks them in.
This is just the beginning.
Stories. We would be honored if you would join us.
Hello, and a very warm welcome to Film Stories with Simon Brew. I am Simon Brew, it's everything you need to know about me. The aim of the podcast, though, is given away by its title. I'm here to talk of the stories of films, and I tend to talk about development stories, production stories, marketing stories, release stories, all those ingredients, really, that go towards making the films that we know and sometimes love. Just that, the films that we know and sometimes love. The films I tend to cover on the podcast lean more towards the mainstream than anything else. They're films I'm interested in or invested in to some degree. I try not to do snark. I try not to punch down. This podcast is a celebration of cinema and a real appreciation that somehow, no matter how difficult, films manage to get made. What you've happened upon here, though, is one of my occasional special episodes of the podcast. I'm really, really thrilled with this as well. It's where I bring in a filmmaker to talk about their latest film or their body of work. And I was delighted earlier this year to have a conversation with the Academy Award-winning screenwriter Eric Roth, also producer, with a producing credit in there for David Fincher's Mank too. But Eric Roth has plied his trade as an acclaimed go-to screenwriter for Hollywood for a very long time, and the conversation you're about to hear takes in quite a lot of his work. I mean, we go from Michael Mann's The Insider to Forrest Gump. We start with an airport movie, and at the point of recording, the Oscar nominations hadn't come out, and he was in contention for his work on Killers of the Flower Moon, which was indeed, as you're about to hear, nominated for a Best Picture Academy Award, setting a record for Eric Roth, although I lost the bet, as you're also going to hear in the podcast itself. Now, one necessary additional bit of preamble here is we recorded this a few days after Eric Roth had had a fall, and what you hear halfway through, I think, the recording is his wife coming in to basically check he's okay. Now, they said leave it in, so you're going to hear this absolutely left in, and this is the conversation, bar one or two little foibles from Zoom, which I cut out, pretty much as it happened. There are films that we touch on in here. There's a Robert Zemeckis film called Here, which isn't out yet, which is coming towards the end of the year. We talk about that. We also talk about Robert Zemeckis' movie Contact. That comes up, which Eric Roth didn't actually write the screenplay for, but you'll hear why it comes up. And then towards the end, there was a story that landed a year or so ago that Eric Roth had been hired by Cher to write the screenplay to her biopic. We catch up on that. He also wrote for Cher previously with the thriller Suspect. A whole bunch of films you're going to hear about come up throughout this conversation. I set it up with just a collection of clips from some of the films he's been involved with, and then what you're going to hear, the other side of this, is my conversation with Eric Roth. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did.
You go public and 30 million people hear what you gotta say. Nothing, I mean nothing, will ever be the same again.
Now, the work we did here is confidential, not for public scrutiny, any more than our one's family matters. We're very serious about protecting our interests.
He's got something to say, he wants to say it, I want it on 60 Minutes.
Hello, my name's Forrest Gump.
Would you like a chocolate?
Oh, thank you.
It's funny what a young man recollects.
You're the same as everybody else. You are no different.
Your boy's different.
Are you stupid or something? Mama says stupid is as stupid does. And Jenny. I'm Forrest Gump.
She was my most special friend. My only friend.
We was together all the time. We was like peas and carrots, Jenny and I.
The Osage, they have the worst land possible. But they outsmarted everybody. The land had oil on it. Black gold. Money flows freely here now.
I do love that money, sir.
That then was a selection of clips from the work of screenwriter, Oscar winner, producer as well, Eric Roth, who joins me for a Film Stories podcast special today. Eric Roth, how are you?
I'm good. It's been a good year for me. I mean, in other words, it's always good. I mean, I'm one of the most blessed human beings on earth, so I can't complain from having many children, grandchildren, which is the most important, and then a career that I couldn't have written for myself, you know.
So at the point we're recording, we're just a little bit ahead of the Oscar nominations, and I'm willing to bet you £1 that you get a further Oscar nomination for Killers of the Flower Moon.
I think, I mean, I'm a horse handicapper, so I think it's a horse race because I think I would like it, to be quite honest, but I think there's like 6 movies for 5 places, you know.
I bet you £1. No,
I don't want to bet you. No, I hope you're right. I would enjoy it for a couple reasons, and you'll see I'm not bragging. But if the movie gets nominated for the Best Picture, I'll have written the most nominated movies. I'm tied now with Billy Wilder.
Really?
Yeah, and if I happen to get nominated in the screenplay category for adaptation, I will have written the most adapted screenplays, nominated movies, and I'm tied right now, John Huston. And here's why I'm not bragging.
It's not bad company.
But I would trade all of them for Billy Wilder's Sunset Boulevard and John Huston's Treasure of Sierra Madre.
But I have read that you've said that before.
Yeah,
and I always call it on stuff like that because there's always someone who's done something you want to do. But I bet were they active today, they would look at something you've done with a degree of MB2. That's just the way of humanity, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I used that weird career before because I'm close friends with. I won't mention the writer's name, but. He had a profile recently in the New Yorker, and I was congratulating him. And he said that he was feeling embarrassed talking to me because he said I had the career he would like to have, and I've had this ridiculously good career. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, you know, and I've also made some flops and things that were probably bad choices, or have written some scripts that were not as good as others. But I mean, as I said when we started that, if I couldn't have written my own career any better, you know, that way. Yeah, pretty amazing.
Ordinarily, I start an interview like this at the start, but I'm going to break with my own rules here and just go right in at the end because it's quite an interesting snapshot of the movie industry that you've got a film coming out the end of this year, as I understand it, called Here. With Robert Zemeckis directing, Tom Hanks starring, Robin Wright co-starring. It's the Forrest Gump crew together again. And you couldn't get
it's quite different though. I don't want to mislead people.
Of course, no.
I think it's basically finished, the movie, except for whatever left he has to do with music and stuff. But it's a pretty extraordinary movie, I think. You know, I don't ever know really. I mean, I have my own feelings about things, and when you're so close to it, after a while, you lose all objectivity. You know, and but it's a fascinating piece from a graphic novel. Yeah. Bob and I called Bob actually to see if he would be interested in me writing Contact 2 for him, because I like that whole arena. And he said, well, it's very complicated. The family's rough to get rights from and this and that. And he said, but I do have a book I'm really interested in. You want to do with me? And he sent me the graphic novel of Here. And I said, I'm in. I love the long and short of it. And it's about one room basically over 100 years in a house.
Yeah.
And he's filmed it in a way that there's no coverage. In other words, it's locked at one angle. And then anything that lived there, like a dinosaur and that kind of thing. So it's pretty as big as you can get and as small as you can get. And I think it's very moving. It's also an incredible, I'm not trying to, it's not as important as Francis Coppola once said to me, if you're watching The Chandelier, you're in trouble, but when Tom Hanks walks on the screen and you hear his voiceover say, hi, Mom and Dad, it's this, I want you to meet Margaret. And he comes on and he looks like he's exactly 22 years old. The deep fake is
really
the most extraordinary thing you've ever seen. And Robin Wright looks like he looks like he's in Big, and she looks like she came out of Princess Bride. And it's a technique that forevermore will never be the same. I could write a movie for the two of them or anybody you want to play 22, no matter what age they are, and you could have them play it. It's extraordinary.
It's a bit terrifying, isn't it, as well?
I think there's a lot of moral ambiguity to it, is what I would say. We had the same thing oddly with Forrest Gump in the sense that
I remember that.
Well, yeah, but now it looks just very clunky and everything. But at that time was sort of almost invented. He invented that kind of Zelig quality. That was as close as I can think of Woody Allen's movie. But we realized that we could put words into anybody's mouth, like John Kennedy could have said. We could have had him say, don't you admire Hitler? Whatever you want. And there's a weird responsibility with it, that you don't think about till all of a sudden you're there.
I mean, you mentioned Contact and Robert Zemeckis just before. I remember the Bill Clinton White House taking umbrage with Robert Zemeckis for Contact when he just wove his characters into a White House press conference, and that was the 90s version of it. It sounds like you've taken this like a whole other generation.
Well, this is will be, I guess we should say state of the art. Is that's good? If it's good, I'm always cautious because you don't know what you're in for. In a way, I was one of the creators of House of Cards,
of course,
and I never knew what be careful what you wish for is all I can say, because streaming, I think, has its major upsides and also big downsides. So it sort of scavenged the thing I love most, which is a 40-foot screen and an audience and being in a movie theater.
And which sort of brings me back to Here, because the story that I read was you couldn't get a studio to back that team.
That's absolutely true.
Sony only bought into it at the Cannes Film Festival once it was all the work had been pretty much put into play. I don't know if
that's quite accurate about when, but you might be right.
Yeah, no, I picked that up. Yeah.
I might be. I just don't know. But yes, we thought, we wrote it on spec. Didn't get a nickel from anybody. So Bob and I just said, let's give it a whirl. And we got the rights to the book, and we wrote it. But to be honest with you, we thought if Tom would do this, that there would be a big bidding war. You know what I'm saying? I mean, why not? The IP of Forrest Gump and all that, and crickets. Nobody was particularly interested, and we did finally get a Miramax, and Bill Block was at that time his name. He still is a producer, and he came up with the money, and eventually they sold it to Sony. But there was no rush to go buy this, and so
it's terrifying in a way, because I remember in my head from the outside looking in, a turning point for that was the early 2010s when Spielberg couldn't get the money to make Lincoln and Ron Howard couldn't get the money to make Rush. And those two had to go off rattling tins. And here's Robert Zemeckis and you sort of having to do the same just to get something like this through there.
No, it's true. I mean, so I don't know I don't know the answer to all that. I mean, I think there's still something ignites people's fires or doesn't, and this, I think they were concerned that it was it's about mortality in its own way.
Yeah.
And it's
but so much is, right?
Yeah, so much is, but they were concerned whether we were going to get a young enough audience and all that stuff. So anyway, I think it's a wonderfully emotional and it earns the emotion movie, and we'll see what happens. They're all in its own way a crapshoot.
I'm fascinated by the idea that you pitched in for Contact 2.
Isn't that funny? It came out of the blue too. Bob and I speak quite frequently, but we don't really talk much about what we're going to do. He might ask me, what are you up to? But I don't know why. I woke up, I guess I had a dream about it or something, and I thought I'd love to do that. And so anyway, that's where it led us,
I hope the path to that clears, but hopefully I'll get to annoy Robert Zemeckis about that as well. I'll find a way to get you the money and the rights. We'll sort that out.
Well, no, I think that's a losing game.
No, I get that impression. Well, it was tough at the time, wasn't it? I remember that, but that's a whole other stuff.
Tough when, excuse me, tough when they did it, and I think Carl Sagan's estate, and his wife, his widow, she guards it very closely, and God bless her.
I've heard you. I'm going to go right back to the other end of your career now, because I've heard you in a couple of interviews describe yourself as a frustrated novelist. That someone who got this spark and love of writing. But I'm just wondering, if I bumped into the 20-year-old you, what kind of writer would you have been at that point? Would you have been a writer?
I think I would have liked to have been both, but quite honestly, I got married very young. I had children very young. And I was a hippie. I took a lot of hallucinogenics. I lived a kind of free lifestyle that way. And I didn't think, I loved writing. I loved English. I was an English major, all that. But I never thought seriously about a career in the quotes. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was just really, I hate to sound as if I'm so heroic in any way, but I was mostly interested in putting food on the table and having a roof over our head. And as I say, I was like 16, 17 years old as a kid, so, and then things just happened to work out. My biggest thing was I won what's called the Samuel Goldwyn Writing Award at UCLA. I wasn't even a film major at that point, and I just said, why not? Let's try it. And I actually tied with a man named Colin Higgins, who wrote Harold and Maude and 9 to 5, and unfortunately passed away far, far too young. But that got me an agent and got me a job and like that, So I think I never, if I have a regret, I never set aside the time to write a novel. And I wish I had. Whether I'd been good or bad at it, God only knows, But
I wonder, though, for someone who wants to tell creative stories, that it's a hell of a tough challenge, isn't it, to put yourself in an environment where the vast majority of us in the audience will only get to witness or experience your work if someone else puts millions of dollars into it.
That's right. No, that's right. Even if it's not millions, but yes, that's it. It's and also it's a completely collaborative medium, even though I would say, the director's the boss, and there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. You're right. So that you could end up fallow. And I know, unfortunately, many writers have had one movie made for 40 years and stuff. So I don't know how they survive that, So yeah, you're right. You're right that way. So it's a gamble of a kind. I guess I had enough arrogance and confidence that what I had to say was said well enough where people would want to do it. And once my movie started getting made, and I wasn't really very successful. I was successful in a minor way until Forrest Gump, and then my career kind of exploded because I think part of it was just being able to have choices of things to do, And then you have to be a good kind of handicapper and figure out what's the best way to do it,
So I had Billy Ray on this podcast a couple of weeks ago, and I brought up his early writing job on the Jetsons. which I think was his first produced work. And obviously it's not the work that he's proudest of, but it's right, kind of something where, you know, the education of that and what he learned from doing that job sounds quite something. I'm going down your credits, and it's just like, you've got an airport movie on there. You've got this hit
I got
very early on.
Airport, not airplane. I wish it was airplane.
Airplane. Well, it's roughly the same year, wasn't it? It was, I think you're a year apart from
very
it.
Close. Yeah, but that's why they did Airplane.
But basically, you've got it. Yeah, you've got what effectively what's Airport 4.
Whatever, 3 or 4. Yeah, and
the Concorde one was yours.
I needed a job. Yeah, the Concorde. It's a terrible movie. But the fun. It's interesting though, because when I need the money, number one, number two, it was a way to get a movie made. But I always believed, as junky as the material might have been, but I felt like I'm going to write the best disaster movie ever made. That's how I looked at it. I don't think I did. But in other words, I always felt that way with whatever I was writing. I think I'll see if I can write the best love story, you know, and you can always fall short that way, but your goals are good. You know, your goals are worth they're esteemed, you know, in that way.
But do you feel a benefit from when the fourth film in a franchise movie in the 1970s becomes a hit with your name on it? I know that was a very producer-driven kind of franchise, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a hit, whether an ant wrote it, you know, that way to a certain extent. But I wrote what I consider one of my best lines of dialogue, and it's completely misogynistic, where Alan Delon, pretty great actor, says to, I forget who the woman was, supposed to be playing a flight attendant, who walks into the cockpit and he says, they don't call it the cockpit for nothing.
Is that what got you the job?
No, I don't think so. I think that was just there. I don't think, but you couldn't even say that anymore, probably, you know.
So I mean, then throughout the 1980s, it's the latter half of the 80s that more of your screenplays get to the screen. But I'm just curious, what was that kind of period from, I don't know, about 82 to 86, which, if you're looking at the list of stuff that you had produced, looks the most barren, but I'd imagine was about the most intense?
I don't know. I mean, I know we were nervous, my wife and I, about making a living and all that. I don't know. I mean, you don't know what, Suspect I wrote with Cher.
Yeah.
That was a big deal for me because she's so known. And I think the movie is, I love the director, Peter Yates.
Peter Yates, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And he made great movies. He made Breaking Away and,
that's a great film.
The Dresser and Bullet.
Yeah. Yes,
so,
of course.
I mean, you're talking about, I loved him personally, and unfortunately, I think his son just died literally last week.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think I screwed up the ending of that movie. I mean, I should have. If you don't know the movie,
I do know the movie.
Yeah,
I do know.
It was just a pot boiler, and it had a great cast, and it had some, and Cher was an interesting choice, and playing a public defender, and it was a lovely experience. I think the person I made guilty was this whole involved kind of too much plot stuff. I think I should have left the person who was charged with the crime guilty, who happened to be Liam Neeson in his first American role in an American film. You know?
Well, I can't mention Peter Yates without mentioning Krull, which was one of the highlights of my youth. 1983's Krull, which has one of the best James Horner scores of all time as well. Not said lightly in the slightest either.
Well,
but
Peter was a lovely, lovely guy. His father, I think, was a colonel.
Yeah.
I think he came from a military family. Very, very thorough, but couldn't have been nicer. His wife's name, I think she's still alive, named Virginia. And he was best friends with a man named Mick Goff, who was a famous British, actually Irish, but he was in all sorts of theater, like Breaking the Code, and he worked with Laurence Olivier and all this, and he played Batman's butler. But he was one of the most magical men I'd ever met. His wife was named. Anyway, she worked for Sotheby's and was an expert on Venice.
Yeah.
And so we traveled with them and stuff. Anyway, he's a lovely part of my life. He's long gone now, but a wonderful man.
So, I mean, just going to suspect, and the only reason I ask these questions is I'm just curious how people deal with the bruises a little bit. Just you're very much in a creative space.
I'm going to give you a really bad bruise. Okay. Yeah. So I wrote a movie called The Horse Whisperer.
Yeah, Robert Redford. Yeah,
Robert Redford.
Was that where you went to live with him for a bit as well?
We lived together. Yeah, we lived together for a number of months. Mostly on long weekends kind of thing. And because I'd work during the week and then I'd go up there and we'd live in Montana together. And at some point I realized he's going to look in the mirror and not want to see me there. And so he I guess you want to just be blunt about it, he fired me at some point. I had written already a version of the script, but he just didn't think we were seeing eye to eye on everything, which was, it happens. And that very weekend, I literally had to fly. That day I was leaving to go be a big deal at the Austin Film Festival, which is for writers.
Yeah.
And here I am just having been fired, supposedly dispensing wisdom, and I was pretty bruised by it. So anyway, that was a dark day for me,
So I mean, one of the reasons I asked this question, I'm not going salacious. It's just I live on the outside of your world, and when I was growing up, no one was telling stories like this of how to deal with the bruises, and you just got kind of a very glossy version of everything's perfect. And then only now do I read a book on the making of Chinatown. It sounds like absolute chaos. Whereas growing up, if I knew that the making of Chinatown was absolute chaos, I was just like, I'm not saying I could make it, but I might have been more inclined to at least give it a go.
I mean, even more so is I don't know, and I know Bob Towne very, very well. I love him, one of our great writers, but it's sort of hinted that somebody else was doing a lot of help there.
Yeah.
This other writer who I don't know. No, but I've always been pretty much honest about myself, so I don't mind. I think I'd have been that in any era, except I guess, but maybe they didn't want you to talk too much about various things. Then, I don't know.
You've already hinted what the turning point of your career was, and again, the story of Forrest Gump, as much as it was, if memory serves, of studio accounting trying to claim it didn't make a profit. I remember that story, but I remember, in the build-up to Forrest Gump, how Paramount kept cutting the budget at the last minute, about how that there wasn't a lot. It's the old cliche that there wasn't a lot of belief in the project. But Stephen Galloway wrote a terrific biography of Sherry Lansing, which details this in exhaustive levels of just how they tried to scrimp and pull that back and pull that back. Now, if I got my chronology of Forrest Gump right, you were there before Robert Zemeckis. You were in there very early.
Very early. I had written the script for what turned out to be a really bad movie called The Postman.
I'm coming to that. Yeah.
So anyway, but that's what precedes Forrest Gump. I was friendly with and knew quite well Mark Canton, who ran Warner Brothers at the time, and his wife in particular, Wendy Feinerman. She owned this book, The Postman, and she ran Steve Tish's company.
Right.
So I wrote a script of that for Tom Hanks. It was supposed to be like Gulliver's Travels. It's set against this topic world. Supposedly that was the end of the world. We never really we had a number of directors who were with it and then off it, and it never really went anywhere. So while that was trying to gestate, she gave me the book for Forrest Gump, and she said, we tried this. We had one or two scripts written, one by the author, one by I don't know who else, and this failed. And would you want to do this, you and Tom? And I gave the book to Tom, and I said, let's see what Tom says. And he said, yeah, what the hell, why not? We got nothing to lose. And I love the idea of it. I mean, being able to tell this saga, and so off we went, and so that I wrote the script. There was Warner Brothers was not keen on it. They put it in turnaround. As I understand, it's notorious in that way because they're very cautious about doing I don't know how many movies they've ever put in turnaround again, to be honest with you. Probably not very many, unless the unless it's somebody like
Well,
Spielberg.
they had Home Alone at the start of the decade, didn't they? And then Forrest Gump was a couple of years later. It wasn't there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not, yeah. But I don't know if we'd have got it in turnaround except for the fact she was married to the head of the studio, you know.
Yeah.
So we had the rights and we took it to Paramount and Brandon Tartikoff, who was a lovely, lovely man who had run NBC and was a genius.
Yeah.
Unfortunately died very young.
Very young, wasn't it? Yeah.
And anyway, Tom and I had the luxury of having Tom act it out for me with me, telling them what we wanted to do with it. And,
what, in the pitch?
Yeah, the pitch, yeah. And they said, great, they'll go off and write it. And, you know, whatever, a year later, I came back. And at that point, Barry Sonnenfeld was going to direct it.
I remember that, yeah.
And then Penny Marshall was very close to doing it. And she had done League of Their Own with Tom. And simultaneously, Bob had gotten it, Zemeckis, and there was kind of a little bit of a competition between Cher, Penny and Bob. And I remember saying to Mike Ovitz, who was the head of CAA and a very powerful agent and everything, saying, "You mean to tell me this isn't going to get made because these two are going to have a pissing contest, you know?" And he said, "I promise you, within a week, one of these people will do it." And there was Bob. And so we took this, you know, Bob said yes, and away we went. I went up to meet with him every week up in Santa Barbara, and he took this whatever script I had, and we started working on that, and he made some great changes, and we just we stayed with it till the rest of the history, you know. So
I'm fascinated by the idea of you take Tom Hanks into the pitch. The only other story like that I've ever heard was the only way they got The Greatest Showman off the ground was they had to take Hugh Jackman in.
Oh, really? I didn't
to sing for them, which just like at that kind of level, you just kind of thinking, aren't these names just kind of enough? But then the beauty and naivety from my side of the building.
Yeah. No, I can tell you other times when I've had huge actors come in and say, "I want to do this," and it didn't convince them. I haven't done that many with the pitch, though. I'll say that maybe he's only one time. I'd have to think about that. But Tom came and acted out a lot of it, you know, how we planned to do it and his kind of personality, and he was wonderful. Yeah, it was a godsend that way. Yeah.
So anyone reading a screenwriting book, I don't know what you think of screenwriting books, but they'll tell you, they tend to tell you about you've got to have obvious conflict, you've got to have a big antagonist, you've got to have all these rules and all these brackets. It strikes me Forrest Gump doesn't actually have many of those, that it sort of breaks quite a lot of the conventional rules.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the only rules I felt were sort of like Shakespearean in the sense you have to have a inciting incident. You have to have a catharsis. You're going to have either Deus ex machina, or you're going to have some kind of other ending, and like that. I mean, in other words, it's going to be 3 or 4 acts, and I don't care if you make the movie standing on your head or do it like Pulp Fiction upside down and backwards. You still got to have the same rules of drama apply, and I think that's it. If you listen, the books are fine. I mean, if they help somebody and they give some inspiration, but, they also say no voiceovers. Well, some of the greatest movies were made, from Citizen Kane through most of Marty's movies, through et cetera. So, and
it'd make Casino about an hour shorter, wouldn't it, if you took the voiceover out?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But so, I mean, that kind of thing. So I don't know. I think you have to just believe and have passion in what you're trying to say. Have some, I believe very strongly, you do have to have such great knowledge of the characters that you can do a psychological portrait of them, that they all have to sound different, speak different. And I tell this story many times, but that I did a rewrite of a movie called Year of the Dragon for Michael Cimino, and he had given Mickey Rourke, who was the star of the movie.
Oh, is this the wallet? Yeah.
The wallet. And I think that's a very important part of writing. In other words, so that you know every character better than anybody, and then hopefully the actor will and the director will, and every little nuance of the person.
So, in the instance of that, for those who haven't heard it, this is where you gave Mickey Rourke a wallet. He never looked at it once, but you knew that was the character.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he knew just by having his back pocket. I still use this old movie program that everybody likes to talk about.
Is that true? Because that's your Wikipedia story. That is.
It's DOS based.
God bless it. God bless it. And you, how many times does that crash, and how many times do you lose your work?
I've only lost the work once. Hi, my wife is just looking in.
Oh, hello.
I'm zooming with this nice Simon man in Britain, England. Where are you in England, Simon?
I'm in Birmingham. I'm in the miserable bit in the middle of England.
Did he mention that he fractured 3 ribs?
He did, and I did say stop at any point.
Is he coming with a treatment?
Is that right?
You can use that in the podcast if you'd like.
Okay.
I'm bragging, but completely true. She's one of the foremost diabetes doctors in the world.
That's incredible.
2,000 patients.
Oddly enough, I have a surgery question to put to you as well. I do. And it goes to something that I've got. One of my children's had to have a lot of surgery. And so this was a long time ago. But I remember talking to a surgeon who's given like me a mantra and a half for life, really. And it tied into something when you were writing The Insider. This is my very odd segue and very odd parallel about how you wrote a page of dialogue, and then Al Pacino looked at it and just said, I can act that. And I've heard that before. I've heard Denzel Washington do that to Ed Zwick and people like that. But what this surgeon told me was he spent the first 10 years of his career learning how to operate. He then spent the next 10 years of his career learning when to operate, and the rest of his career learning when not to operate. And I thought that was absolutely fascinating.
Genius.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
And I just wonder if there's it might be the lightest parallel into your world. But I've been reading interviews where you're saying you're writing slightly less in your scripts now compared to 30 years ago. I just wonder if there's a really odd parallel into that you've got this kind of...
Well, I think maybe you do by experience decide what you're going to do, what you should do, and then what you shouldn't do, so there's something close to that. But anyway, she does things that save lives. She kissed me now and she's out of here.
Incredible. It's really nice to meet you, and thank you for being an absolute superhero.
Well, as soon as he's done, he needs his respiratory treatment so he doesn't get pneumonia, but I'll leave him for another.
No, I won't give him pneumonia, I promise.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, we've now mucked up your whole...
No, it's huge.
Welcome to use whatever you want to.
Well, how can human beings muck something up? Yeah, isn't that the interesting stuff?
I think it's great. Yeah. I think it's love.
No, I think this. So we were talking about Forrest Gump just before. Yeah. And Forrest Gump wins you an Oscar. You probably know this. Forrest Gump becomes this absolute, beyond a hit film, an actual cultural phenomenon. I still walk into theme parks and see a restaurant based on Forrest Gump. I still hear it. All of these things resonate. What changed for you, though? What was the aftermath of that for you?
Well, honestly, the aftermath was directly that I went to do The Horse Whisperer, and Bob's basically said, what have you done for me lately? So that was the direct. Beyond that, obviously, it gave me cachet to have great choices of what I wanted to do, and that's a key to many things. And then you have to be smart in what you choose. It's not always about. It's always for me about the theme of things and the material, obviously, but you also think is this going to be a year and a half out of my life and it's going to have no fruit? You won't bear any fruit. And so you try to see what's the best situation, even though I think at the end of the day, it's what story do you want to tell?
Yeah.
And then you hope you tell it well,
But when you're writing in your DOS program, how is your imposter syndrome? If most of us have to some degree,
I have it as bad as anybody,
And does that change after an Oscar? Does that change after a success? Does that give you any extra plate of armor?
You have it. Yeah, you do. you have a moment where you're feeling sort of this glory of whatever you hope to create, and people feeling that they're so good, and then you're back to square one, and you know where you feel you really haven't done as well as. I mean, I believe, and Francis told me this, I'm using him again, but that if given a chance, he'd redo Godfather 2, which is probably as close to a perfect movie, because he has flaws at what he thinks are inadequacies like anybody else, you know. And so at some point you have to let it go. But yeah, I mean, I used to have these things, you know, like dreams, corny dreams that at that point they'd have, you know, Variety was, you know, sort of the Bible of the industry, and was, you know, paper hard copy that came out every day. And I thought, you know, there's definitely gonna be a headline at some point. Eric Roth, a fraud, found out, you know, that kind of thing. You know, so I mean, and to go on with that in a way, I don't know why it's a longer conversation about certain things in my life and with my folks and this and that, but why do I still want the validation of an Oscar nomination at the age of 78?
Yeah.
In other words, why am I concerned about it, really? You know what I'm saying? So it's, I think maybe part of it's just being human, and you want your work recognized if you think it's good and that kind of thing. But it becomes a little too, probably more important than it should be in a bigger life, you know.
Would you remember Spielberg when he won his second Oscar for Saving Private Ryan? And the opening of his speech was, "Is it okay to say I really wanted this?" And I remember sitting watching that and thinking, but you're Steven Spielberg.
Yeah, why would you feel that way?
Why do you feel like that? But you know, you're a human, aren't you? Yeah.
I guess that would be an area I might stay away from on this. It's a little maybe more personal, but
no, I understand that.
I know why I think it's so, and it has to do with wanting someone love from somebody, you know, that you don't. I think feel like you haven't gotten in some way. You know?
No, I understand that. I mean, the aftermath of Forrest Gump, the two films that came out with your name on afterwards. I mean, you've talked about being fired from one of them, and then you've talked about the other one being a film that I get the impression you're not very keen on. I quite like The Postman. I'm one of the people who
really. Well, yeah. Well, you're like a fanboy then, or something.
I don't know. I just don't see that. I don't see the hate. How's that?
That was, but I had nothing to do with that. For I wrote it, had written it 10 years previously, you know. So. And I'm actually quite good friends with the guy who wrote it, Brian Helgeland.
Yes. Well, he's gone on.
Yeah, he's gone on. He won an Oscar.
Wasn't it LA Confidential the same year as The Postman for him?
Mystic River.
Of course,
And he, wonderful man. We just actually spent the day together about a week ago. But anyway, I've told this story too many times, but I'll tell it again. So he called me as they were editing the movie, and he said, I want you to know if you want credit on this, I'll be glad to share it with you. Or if you don't want, I understand that, however you feel about it. And so I said, well, Brian, it's very generous of you. Let me think about it. So I called my agent up, who also was representing Kevin Costner, who had directed the movie.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, Eric, you have to have credit. This movie's just magnificent. And so the upshot was we both won a Razzie for the worst movie of the year, Brian and I. So I think the movie, for me, for my taste, was far too earnest.
Oh yeah, I see the problems. Yeah,
and so that if you're going to go from Lilliputians and that kind of world to this, I just thought it didn't work for me. I don't blame Brian or anybody else. It just was I think Kevin had an idea of something that just didn't work to me.
I'm not taking a bullet for it. I just admire people taking a swing. That's one person taking a swing.
I thought what I had done, and I'm not besmirching Brian, I don't know what he actually did, but I thought what I had originally was very imaginative, a lot of fun, and also kind of made a point, you know. So if Gulliver's Travels, I think, is still a good idea to some extent in that world, you know.
So you've talked a few names throughout this conversation. You've talked Brian there. You've talked I'll ring Tom, I'll ring Bob, and then I mean, when you were breaking into filmmaking, I think there were names around you: Hal Ashby, Francis Ford Coppola, and right through to today, I read stories that Judd Apatow might turn up at your door. A man called Phil Alden Robinson. Was that right? Oh, I was giving my card. We'll be great friends. But Phil Alden Robinson put us in touch, for instance. And there's this community aspect to your work, which feels a little bit paradoxical to me, given that a lot of your work is you, a screen, your brain, and your fingers by yourself.
Yeah,
How important is the community bit of it? How vital is that for your rocket fuel?
I like it. I mean, I think, yeah. I mean, it's just after a while it becomes geometric. The number of people I work with, known, you know. So, I mean, I've worked with directors like Kurosawa. You know what I'm saying?
Of course. Yeah, I was watching it this morning. Yeah, Rhapsody in August.
Yeah, Rhapsody in August. So very smart of you. So you have this, start getting a sort of big life within this world. You know, I think we all think of it as some giant high school, you know, and there's
that's nice.
Yeah. Well, it can be, and it can be, if you're not successful, it can be hurtful, you know. You wonder why, but what about me, you know? And I don't know what the criteria is to become a success. I think it has to do with a lot of alchemy and then some talent, no question. So it's high school is a really good I think definition of this place.
If I had to pick one of your films, one of your scripts to take away with me and just put that one on loop for all time, read it for all time, it would be The Insider. Because The Insider to me is a film, I've got no idea how you all got away with it. I just don't know.
Well, I still don't, to some extent, because first of all, when Michael asked me to do it, I didn't know Michael. I mean, he called me and said, could you come over? I got this project, blah, blah, blah. And I was a big admirer of his work. And I said, I don't know if I can do this, Michael. I don't know a docudrama from my elbow, you know, in that sense. I'm not. It's such a oddball, slightly obscure kind of talk. I understand the instinct to want to do it, but on the other hand, what is it? In other words,
yes.
I mean, I couldn't. So either I or both of us decided we're going to make this into sort of a thriller of a kind, you know.
Yeah.
And so it's not, you know, it's not like 3 Days of the Condor or something, but it has that aspect to it, sort of a psychological thriller, I guess. And then the sense of what a corporation or a government can do to you, you know, in other words, if they're out after you. And it was a great experience. We had the right people, and Michael directed his heart out, and I thought I did as good a writing as I've done, you know. It was the only time of all my nominations I was disappointed we didn't win with the screenplay, because I thought it was really for degree of difficulty, it was really something. And I actually, it was kind of ironic, because I had given some help to John Irving, who's a wonderful writer, and Garp is one of the great books. How to dramatize a movie. He did Cider House Rules, but I think it paled in comparison to our script, you know.
I think
he can outright me any day of the week, so that's okay.
I mean, you talked earlier about people get to the end of 40 years and they've only made one film. If someone had got to the end of 40 years and just made The Insider, and I'm not slighting your other films, it's just that it is the balancing act to that. Because if I've got it right as well, there were external pressures on that film. I remember reading news stories that it was on the verge of being sued left, right, and centre. That the real life people were live and active on the outside of it.
We had to have by so many lawyers vetted everything. You're talking about major personalities like Mike Wallace at the time, one of the great journalists, you know, in television. He invented the hard interview and a whole show that a network was built on, which is 60 Minutes. And I won't say who, but there were certain people in the studio we made it for really didn't want the movie made, and was very obstructionist when we came to selling it to television eventually. And it was fraught, and yet somehow it survived and got made, and I think it's a hell of a movie.
It is a hell of a movie.
Yeah, it's also a tricky movie because Michael's very analytic in his way of thinking about things and writing. He's a good writer, but just very different than I am.
Well, it strikes me as well that
let me just finish though. So there are certain things in the movie that kind of break the rules of good writing.
Okay.
Because, for instance, we have a scene in the movie that I would have never wanted to write, because it's the best kind of writing for a screenwriter, and it's very difficult to get there, and novelists can do it, but very few do it well either, is subtextual writing. We're not just doing exposition. Obviously, bad writing is exposition where two people are talking about things they know what they're talking. It's already, they know what they don't need to have the conversation because they know what they're talking about, and they both know. And but Michael wanted this scene which is in the movie, which is really quite good, but it violates all the rules I know. It's like it's supposed to be a lunchroom scene with all the 60 Minutes people, and Lowell Bergman, played by Al Pacino, is laying out really the movie, but he's supposedly laying out. He says we need to get this guy a lawyer, and we need to do this, and we need to do that. He says 8 things, and what that is laying out exactly what the movie needs to do, show how he gets a lawyer and how but somehow he made it conversational enough and feeling real, or Michael did, that we violated the rules and it worked.
It's I remember as a teenager watching Back to the Future Part 2. Mm-hmm. And the bit in the middle of that where they had no other way to explain it than get Christopher Lloyd with a piece of chalk and a board to draw a diagram because the words wouldn't do it. I hadn't even noticed that the insider was laying out the movie. So that's my rewatch.
There, yeah. And Michael devised that he said we need to do this. I don't know, maybe I was the one who came up with how, where to do it and how we do it. But so that's I'm proud of that movie for sure. I've been lucky where I've had those kind of movies without particular sentiment in quotes. Yeah. And then some sentimental movies that or at least very human stuff like Benjamin Button and stuff, so which is probably more my stock and trade to some extent, even though I think I can write almost anything but probably a comedy. I'm not sure I can be very good at that. I can have some irony, but a comedy's hard.
Isn't Forrest Gump part comedy?
Yeah, but I think yes, but for sure. Yeah, and it got more farcical because Bob is so farcical, Okay. And, so where a guy's falling into the mud and he comes out with a smiley face, on his T-shirt. So there was that was Forrest Gump was from some other world. I can only tell you that. I don't know. He had 2 or 3 previews, Bob, and he always went to the same theaters, and we ended up at this big theater in San Jose, California. I think it held 1,000 people or something. And we were flying home with the executives from Paramount, and they had all the cards from the screening. And I remember John Goldwyn, who is vice president, I guess, or whatever his title was under Sherry, said, "You just went into the Raiders of the Lost Ark territory. You have 99% approval." And I said, "Oh my God," something resonated, And that was an amazing. And Bob actually said early, this is before Oscars or anything else, he said, "We'll never be here again in our careers." Yeah. And I'm not sure we ever have in that sense, and maybe we've done better work or different work. And what that kind of odd alchemy of that, and then I don't think it wasn't very well reviewed, to be honest with you.
No, I remember that.
Yeah, it was a little, I think they would have called it right wing probably, even though that wasn't my point of view. But I mean, I think one of the nicest compliments was from Quentin Tarantino in discussing the politics of it in that sense, because he said, "Isn't this the most ironic mainstream movie you've ever seen?" Which was very nice.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're nearly out of time. I did what there's two
we
quick
can
things.
go on for a while now. We can go on for a while. Unless
I can't. No, I can't have you having pneumonia. That's all.
No, I'll be fine.
Well, can I just? You come out the other side of the Insider. I just wonder if once you've gone through something like that, it builds a creative courage. You know, when you've done something that feels like a mountain. It's just like, could you have done something like Munich before you tackled the Insider, for instance?
I think I could have.
Really?
That's maybe my arrogance. Yeah,
was that the dispassionate bit that you were just talking about before? That you can
a little bit, but also, as I said to you with the airport, I thought, given the assignment, I was going to try to write the best version of that. You know, so I always had that. I mean, it's like I used to play bridge, and it was like, you know, the way I supposedly play was bid bold and go down. You know what I'm saying? So I didn't mind taking chances, and in the main they've paid off fairly well. I could tell you some movies that didn't work, you know, like The Postman, or I liked a particular movie called Lucky You, the
Curtis Hanson one.
Yeah, and that didn't really work out. Curtis
didn't even get a cinema release over here.
No, it did.
Just went. Did it?
No, it did. I'll tell you a quick story.
I had to import the DVD. I remember that.
Well, the night Forrest Gump came, the day Forrest Gump came out, Tom and I and Bob Zemeckis went around the theaters just to enjoy, hopefully, the reaction of the theater, of the crowds. If there were crowds, we didn't know if there was going to be or not. And we went to a theater in Westwood, and the forecourt was all dark, and we went up to the box office, and there wasn't anybody even in there. And we said, "Oh my God, this is a disaster." And then we looked, and it showed the show times, all sold out. They had a midnight show they had, and we walked in, and the kids were sitting all over the floor, the college students, and roaring, just having the time of their lives. And I said, "Oh my God, this is amazing." And so now, when Lucky You came out, exact same theater, opening night, my wife and I walked, went to the forecourt. It was basically empty. There was a ticket taker, and we bought our tickets, walked in. There were 6 people in the theater.
Yeah. See, I don't think that even got a cinema release in the UK.
I don't know. That's very possible. Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to write a little love story, and I thought Curtis, I will never say, I like Curtis very much. He unfortunately, which I didn't know and he didn't know, I don't think, started to have Alzheimer's.
Horrible story, that.
Yeah, horrible story. And I had hoped more for the movie. I'm not sure if it was miscast, but I think maybe there was somebody, Eric Bana maybe wasn't the exact right person for it. But anyway, it just didn't work. And there you go. You know, so it goes, like Kurt Vonnegut says, you know.
Can you give me a flavor? I mean, I was reading the story of The Good Shepherd, for instance, and about how that was written for Francis Ford Coppola. Then in came Wayne Wang. Then maybe Tom Cruise is going to do it. Then maybe Philip Kaufman was going to do it. I'm sure I saw John Frankenheimer's name in there somewhere.
Yes, that's how. Yeah, and Matthew McConaughey was interested in it.
Yeah.
He was just a baby at the time. Francis was going to do it, and who knows how good that movie might have been. Because certainly something he could have. He was very obsessed with Harlot's Ghost, which was a Norman Mailer book about Lana Klepp about James Angleton, and so that's what I wrote. This original version of that, basically, not the book per se, but this same territory. And his son died, unfortunately, during that period, so he didn't want to proceed. And Wayne, I forgot about. That's funny. He was Wayne had been with Zoetrope, so it went to him. And then Phil came on, and Phil and I were very good friends. And Phil just couldn't get it done. Unfortunately, nobody was to finance it. I think he'd have made a great movie too. And it went to Frankenheimer. And John and I became quite close, and he was preparing to do it, and he died. And so he had been at that point working with De Niro, and he made a movie called Ronin.
Yeah.
De Niro did, and Bob was fascinated with the CIA, always wanted to do a movie about the CIA. And so he read this and was taken with it. And I mean, that movie took almost 12 years to get made, you know.
Well, I was curious about that. And you're basically the one constant through that story, from what I can tell. But I'm just wondering, as all of these different people came on board, were you having to slightly tonally change the film a little bit to accommodate each one?
Well, I wouldn't know for Francis, no. Not for Phil either. I think the script was, to pat myself on the back, a hell of a script.
Yeah.
It was very long, but it was very complete. It was filled with details that people don't know about the CIA. I used real events and fictionalized many. It would have been hard to argue with the screenplay if you wanted to make that as a movie. And so I don't know where it wasn't where somebody said you're missing a third actor. You know, I don't, you know, these characters aren't working. I don't think there was any need to change me, you know, in other words, because I was a keeper of the kind of the fountain on that particular movie. Yeah.
And so, I mean, just pretty much bringing it up to where we are. I mean, I look at your career and you've enjoyed success with directors who other people would suggest are creatively tough. You know, Michael Mann and David Fincher are not people I would want to go into a creative argument with unless I had 15 ring binders of better ideas. And even then I'd expect them all to be shot down. And then
look, it's a form of matrimony, these jobs like that, you know, and I think I learned early on, there was a great, wonderful guy named Stuart Rosenberg, who was kind of my mentor. He had me when I was 19 years old go down and rewrite the Drowning Pool.
The Drowning Pool, was it? That was the Harper sequel.
Harper sequel. And,
yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I always tell the same story, so when these things are repeated, I'm sorry. But
no, not at all.
I had a new pair of corduroys and I had a new briefcase. I walked on the set in Lafayette, Louisiana, and Paul Newman said to me, "Our savior's here." And it's far from that. And we were friends for the rest of his life, Paul and I love that man. I think I have nice way of having relationships that last.
Yeah, I spotted that.
David and I fight like cats and dogs, but he respects me, and I think he's the best Fincher. And he's one of the more loyal, lovely people I've ever met, but as tough as nails.
Yeah.
And we would, on Mank, when we were doing some work on trying to shore up some things that his father had written in the script, and we started 5:30 in the morning on Zoom or whatever it was called then, FaceTime, and we would fight like mothers. And but he's very David. It's a longer conversation, but it's easier to work, I must say. Never mind David's personality, but it's easier to work with people who are born or writers and writer-directors than somebody who's not a writer, so that you have a shorthand and also way more forgiving in an odd way. I mean, so David, not being a writer, he'd always had to prove to him why this is going to work, and he's very literal, and he wants B to follow A, and I like to wander. And you know, one of the things I loved in Benjamin Button, I had written some nonsense thing about that little section about Brad Pitt and that wonderful actress Tilda Swinton. In the middle of the night, what's a hotel like in the middle of the night? And I had some nonsense I wrote about something with the tea, how long you had to steep it, and this and that. It was complete nonsense, but it sounded right and it sounded great for an English person saying it there in that hotel. And David said, "What kind of horse shit is this?" So he left it in, just saying, because it's like he said, "I'm going to show how unscientific you are." Everything. Anyway, I think you have to recognize the director, his boss. That this Stuart Rosenberg taught me that with on the Onion Field, that I had a scene I loved and he didn't love as much as I did, and we fought and fought and fought for weeks, and he finally said, "Just leave it in the script. I'm not going to shoot it." And that was the end of that conversation, and that was a lesson to be learned. You know, so you better find a third way to tell things that are, you know, your way, the director's way, and then a way that you both feel comfortable with it intellectually and creatively. And so I think that's part of the secret to my success, is that I was able to get along with people and give them to most extent what they wanted, and what I wanted, so it wasn't where I had to feel like I was selling out every time.
And so by the time this podcast goes out in a couple of weeks, I fully expect to have won my pound. And
I'm going to send you. I'm going to send it to the charity of your choice.
That's excellent. That's excellent. I will duly nominate. That's fine. But this,
and I don't want you to send one to me if I happen to win. So
no. I will gladly give you a pound. I've got one English.
So here's what's going to happen.
Here.
I'm going to get up. Here's what's going to happen. I don't have one of those.
There you go. I've got a pound right there.
I got a $1 here. So here's what's going to happen. You'll know quickly. I'm going to wake up I think they do it at 5:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Here in LA.
Yeah, I'm awake then. Don't worry.
Here we'll come to the nominations for best adapted screenplay are right.
Yeah.
Alphabetical. So I know. Unless I'm shocked.
You've run this race before, yeah.
I'm a horse handicap. Like I said, let's assume American Fiction is going to get nominated. I think it has a decent chance. Then there would be B, which would be Barbie, right?
Yeah.
Now, because they added that to the adapted, which is unfortunate for me.
You really are a horse person, aren't you?
Now you get to, it's either going to say Killers of the Flower Moon, or they're going to go right to Oppenheimer, Poor Things,
yeah,
and then Zone of Interest, and that would be the.
Oh, that's tight, isn't it?
Oh, so there's 6 movies, I think, for 5 places.
Do you know what
now,
I'm going to do?
Unless there's some surprise. So
you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put a second pound coin on this now. There you go.
All right.
There you go. £2 coins.
All right.
And if not, a charity's going to be £2 up. So you've not lost either way.
No, I'm not going to lose. I can't lose any way except for whatever ego I might have about it.
Well, the last
first
thing
of all, the movie's guaranteed to get. I would say it's 99 to 100% get nominated, probably for Best Picture and all those things it deserves. Marty Scorsese, and so it would be my own disappointment, but it wouldn't change anything in life. And obviously, I hope it. Anyway, enough about this.
Well, no. I think the worst you're going to get with Killers of the Flower Moon is a 4-hour film played in cinemas around the world and really strong reviews. And I mean, in the UK, I think in the States as well, got loads of people into the cinema to see the kind of film that people aren't supposed to come into the cinema to see anymore.
That's right. No, it did quite well. It's got incredible reviews. From the critics I cared about, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
It won the New York Film Critics Award.
Yeah.
It was named by the New Yorker the best film of the year, by the New York Times the best film of the year. I mean, all those things you want if you care about that. And not to reduce your high piece of art down to a very low denominator. It passed the bladder test. I am a man of an age whereby to not go to the toilet the same way, my brother.
to not go to the toilet for nearly 4 hours is quite something, and I didn't. And that is the high.
Well,
that's what they should put on the poster. Well, yeah, but trailers. Trailers.
You're
right? Trailers, adverts, and so the biggest we have talked about some incredible films here, but the biggest compliment, surely the cap of your career is I didn't go to the toilet for 4 hours because of you.
I love that.
Can you just give us just one line before I let you get your medication and I'm conscious you're in lots and lots of pain on just this collaboration with Scorsese, because we've talked about Fincher, we've talked about Michael Mann, and they're tough and exacting, whereas Scorsese seems quite a lot about freedom.
Completely. David is David. I'm just looking at David's picture here, his wife Fincher. Marty is the most giving and the most accepting. If you say I want to write the movie backwards, he will say let's try it.
Yeah,
he will go to any length to try to get the best creatively out of you and out of himself from that. What will inspire him, and it was a long experience. I mean, over 7 years, and this big giant change we made in the telling of the story, and I think for the right reasons, and I think he made a masterpiece. I really do. I mean, length and all, and he's as gifted, and he knows more about movies than I could ever on the, in his small finger. And he's also, I'm a big reader, and he is too. So we have literate, things we can talk about, and we're kind of like family now. I mean,
Love that.
Yeah, and he's as nice a man as I've ever worked with. He has his moments where he believes in certain things and wants to make sure he can articulate them. But it was, I mean, but I'm lucky. I've had the same kinds of experience with all these different directors, where it's always the ones that work out. And the movie doesn't even have to be great. I mean, in other words, where we've just wrong about the subject or something. I mean, I loved working with Stephen Daldry. I don't think the movie's as great a movie as it could have been. Maybe
Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close.
Yeah, that got nominated.
That got you a Best Picture note. That contributed to the record. Yeah,
and Max von Sydow and and all that. And
yeah.
So I think it's about relationships, but Marty's certainly tied for the top of the list, and the most giving, I think, in that way, that he wants to get everything out of you in the best way. I would say, if I had to, some of the directors gave me great anxiety, though, so that what can I really match up to what these folks need. Marty, I don't think Marty was that way in that sense. I never felt I was under the gun. David, Michael Mann, but that's just who they are, so it's fine. It's about their passion. It's not about them trying to beat you up.
And am I right in thinking, in the midst of all of this, you're writing the life story of Cher?
I did, and that failed.
It did.
Have an exclusive.
Oh, okay. I don't like exclusives about failure.
I think the script is great. I really do. Yeah, and I think it'd be incredible. Cher, and we're still really good friends. I've known Cher for since Suspect. And we still text 3-4 times a week. She said, "I don't think this represents me," and I said, "You're wrong." And I took this all from actually interviews you gave, and I even had her narrating the movie from at her age now. Yeah. So that I just I don't know. It was not what how she wanted to be portrayed, and we'll never know whether she was right or wrong. At least from my script, And no, that was it. I was disappointed about that, but so it goes, It's like I have plenty of things, I can't complain.
Well, that's all part of the race, right?
Well, I think I won't tell you another person I did. I wrote a script about, which I think was a great script, and they also didn't want it, the movie made. So my lesson was, do not do pictures about people who are alive.
And yet the contrast of that, I think, is if you put the two pictures side by side, Bohemian Rhapsody and Rocket Man. I think Bohemian Rhapsody is a perfectly entertaining film. I think Rocket Man is a far more interesting one, because they could go to the person who was alive and ask permission to go to more far off places, whereas there was far more respect. Respect is probably the wrong word, but more reverence in the case of Bohemian Rhapsody.
Yeah, I honestly, I respected both movies. I don't think I was not wild about either particularly. I mean, in other words, I think they did some great work, and I was more involved with Bohemian Rhapsody in the sense of, and I think he gave a great performance.
Yeah.
But I had Star Is Born out at the same time, so
of course.
So I think I was in a competitive mood,
I see the competitive fire in your eyes right throughout this conversation. Eric Roth, this has been an absolute treat and a delight. And thank you for suffering through the pain barrier. And I hope we get to.
Here going green.
I can tell, and I can't be responsible for the end of Eric Roth. There are too many.
That'd be ironic.
You've got to go and sort Contact 2 out for me, because I really want to watch that.
Well, I'll tell you this much. It's not Contact 2, but I just turned in a script, not now, it's a few months, but to Denis Villeneuve, that's from an Arthur Clarke book set in that he wrote in 1968, I think. That's pretty extraordinary. So it's not Contact, but it's it's in that realm. I will say that. Yeah.
I hope we get to chat again. Eric Roth, this has been a delight.
Me
Thank
too.
you.
Thank you so much. All right. I want
Thank
that
you.
money.
Well, it's here. It's here. Look.
I want that money going to charity.
It's here. You can. I tell you what. It's either £2 is either going to go to a UK diabetes charity or a US diabetes charity. How's that?
Perfect.
Everybody wins, right?
Everybody wins. Exactly. That's how you can title this podcast. Everybody.
That's great. I'm rooting for you. Thank you so much for your time. The very best to your wife as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye. And that was my conversation with Eric Roth, which was recorded before he didn't get an Academy Award nomination for Adapted Screenplay for Killers of the Flower Moon, but Killers of the Flower Moon indeed did get a Best Picture nomination. So he got one record so far, not the other, but plenty more films coming up. And it brings me to the end of this latest episode of Film Stories. So, as always, thank you so much for listening and thank you for your time. If I've not bored you completely, you can get more from me on whatever Twitter's called at the moment, at Simon Brew. I'm on Blue Sky as well, at Simon Brew there as too. Film Stories is at Film Stories. We're at Facebook, facebook.com/Film Stories Online, youtube.com/Film Stories. If you like this podcast, want to financially support it, then you can go to patreon.com/Simon Brew. Put some coins in the pot there. You get podcasts early. You find out what I'm up to. You get them ad-free as well. And then I have Film Stories print magazines, both Film Stories, which the UK's biggest film magazine, 168 pages every issue. That's on sale. And also the latest issue of Film Junior, which to my knowledge is the only regular print film magazine for under 15s. Hugely passionate about both of those. You can find them at store.filmstories.co.uk. And then you can find the Film Stories website, which has got news, reviews, features, mischief at filmstories.co.uk. But now I'm going to leave you in peace. I'm off to watch a whole load more films, and I will be back soon with your regular episode of the podcast. Until then, you all take care, all look after yourselves, stay safe, and I will be back soon with another bunch of Film Stories. Bye bye. Thank you.